Welcome to Caribbean Noir, where every island has a secret. Step into a world of hidden legacies, ancestral whispers, and stories soaked in salt, blood, and moonlight. Here the spirits speak, the past never sleeps, and no truth stays buried forever. Subscribe, light a candle, turn on your post notifications so you never miss a video, and listen closely. The story begins now.
The envelope didn't look like much. Cream-colored, hand-addressed, with edges slightly smudged, probably from humidity. Zora almost tossed it aside with the rest of her morning mail. Bills, a fashion event invite, a half-open catalog. But something about the handwriting stopped her. Elegant cursive, familiar in a way that brushed the edge of memory. She peeled it open slowly, not yet sitting down. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, folded neatly, with the scent of cloves and something older, something green. It was from a law office in Dominica. Her grandmother, Anita had passed. And Zora had inherited the house. For a few minutes, all she could hear was the dull rush of city life outside her Manhattan apartment. Car horns, sirens, the hum of construction. But in her chest, there was only silence, wide, heavy silence. Her grandmother's name hadn't crossed her lips in years. Zora sank onto the velvet stool beside her kitchen island, clutching the paper. The details were sparse. The Toussaint family home, nestled in the forested hills of a village called Morne Mahout, was now hers. She was instructed to come in person, to finalize matters properly. The line at the end felt handwritten, not by a lawyer. The house remembers. She dropped the letter like it burned her fingertips. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, fragments of the past floated up. The bright yellow of her grandmother's head wrap, the sound of mortar and pestle grinding herbs, the way the floorboards used to creak as Zora tiptoed to the back room. She hadn't been back since she was 9, after Mama Anita and her mother had a loud, ugly fight on the veranda. Her mother never spoke of it again. Zora pushed the duvet off and got up. The city lights bled into her bedroom like ghost lanterns. She padded barefoot to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of red wine, and stared at the letter on the counter. She wasn't sentimental. She'd built her life far from herbal oils and jungle hills. She ran campaigns for wellness brands, lived in sleek high-rises, and wore tailored suits in shades of power. But the idea of that wooden house, alone and aging in the forest, tugged at something buried in her. Maybe she'd go, for a few days, handle the paperwork, say goodbye properly. It was just a house. She didn't believe in spirits or old family myths. Not anymore. But as she stood at her window, watching Manhattan blink like a machine too alive to rest, she whispered her grandmother's name under her breath, soft, like a memory. Anita. Outside, a sudden gust of wind knocked over a potted basil plant on her fire escape. The glass windows rattled. The island air hit her like a bomb. Thick, warm, and scented with damp soil and overripe mangoes. As Zora stepped off the plane at Douglas Charles Airport, her silk blouse clung to her back, and her curls swelled with humidity before she even reached the customs line. She hadn't set foot in Dominica in over 20 years. The colors felt brighter than she remembered, sky a piercing blue, mountains rolling like waves of green, the sun painting everything gold. She'd dressed for comfort, wide-leg linen trousers, a cropped tank, and oversized sunglasses. But she still felt out of place. Too polished, too cityfied. The drive to Morne Mahout took nearly an hour. Her driver, a stout man named Jerome with salt and pepper locks and a playlist full of burning spear and culture, chatted the whole way. "You Mama Anita's granddaughter, E.H. People still talk about she in the hills. Woman was strong like the wind. Some say she could call rain." Zora smiled politely, unsure how to respond. As the car twisted through dense forest roads, past breadfruit trees, wild cane, and brightly painted houses. Clinging to hillsides, Zora's chest began to tighten. She hadn't thought much about what it would feel like, coming home to a place that had long since stopped feeling like hers. When the house came into view, tucked between towering grapefruit and banana trees, it looked exactly as she remembered. A tall wooden structure with green shutters, a slanted zinc roof, and a wraparound veranda that sagged ever so slightly on the left side. The paint had faded. The vines crept a little higher. But the house stood, waiting. She stepped out of the car slowly. The path up to the veranda was cracked and overgrown with moss. As she placed her hand on the railing, a flicker of something moved in her belly, an odd sensation, like remembering a dream halfway through waking. Inside, the air was cool and still. A faint scent of bay leaf, dust, and lavender oil lingered in the walls. The furniture remained: carved mahogany chairs, an old rocking chair by the window, jars of dried herbs lining the shelves in the kitchen. She walked the house room by room, pausing at each threshold like entering a shrine. Every room held ghosts of memory, quiet laughter, stern looks, whispered prayers in the night. When she reached the back of the hallway, she stopped. There it was. The door that was always locked. Still locked. Still sealed tight. Her hand hovered over the handle. But she wasn't ready, not yet. She told herself she wasn't afraid. That night, curled under thin cotton sheets in the old guest room, Zora tried to rationalize the way her skin prickled every time the wind brushed the shutters. The locked door at the end of the hall haunted her thoughts. It had always been locked, even as a child. Mama Anita used to call it her prayer room, though no one ever saw her go in. The wood was darker than the rest of the house, and etched near the top corner was a symbol, 3 spirals entwined in a circle. She hadn't noticed that before. Or maybe she just didn't remember. That night, sleep came in patches. At 3:16 a.m., Zora sat bolt upright. A creak, soft but distinct, sounded in the hallway. She listened. Nothing else. Just the distant call of frogs and wind through banana leaves. Still, she tiptoed out of bed, wrapping herself in a shawl. Her feet moved slowly across the creaky floor, stopping just short of the locked door. It was closed, as always. But this time, the scent of cloves and camphor seeped from beneath the crack. She stepped back. The next morning, she chalked it up to nerves. She was in a new place, alone, unsettled. The mind played tricks, didn't it? By day, the house seemed harmless. She made coffee, swept the veranda, made a grocery list she never finished. But the shadows in the hallway felt closer, like they leaned toward her. She called the lawyer's office, scheduled the property for a review. She told herself she'd sell the house within the month. But, later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the forest came alive with chirps and rustling leaves, she caught herself standing in front of the door again. Hand hovering, heart pounding, still locked, still waiting. Zora had made arrangements for a carpenter to do some repairs to the house before it can be put up for sale. What she didn't expect was the carpenter to be so young. Or so grounded. Malik Baptiste stood barefoot on the gravel drive, holding a coil of rope and a toolbox, the sleeves of his faded denim shirt rolled up to his elbows. His skin was deep brown, and his hair, jet black locks pulled into a loose bun, swayed slightly with the breeze. "You Zora?" he asked, voice low and melodic. She nodded, noting the slight scar on his left cheek. "I used to fix things for Miss Anita. She tell me the house was alive. Said you'd be coming." Zora raised a brow. "Did she now?" He chuckled. "She also said you were stubborn, just like she was." She tried not to smile, but she couldn't help it. Malik moved through the house with reverence, touching beams, testing floorboards, inspecting the sagging veranda. He spoke softly to himself as he worked, like the house was listening. Suddenly, out of nowhere, "You ever open that back room?" he asked without looking up. Zora stiffened. "It's locked." "Good," he said, nailing a loose plank into place. "It stays locked until it's time. The house will tell you when." She rolled her eyes. What does that even mean? He didn't answer, just smiled. Later in the afternoon, he returned with a bag of bay leaves and lemongrass. For the corners. It clears the heavy energy. She didn't believe in that stuff, but she let him place the leaves anyway. That night, the footsteps returned. And this time, they stopped in front of the locked door. She just laid still, listening. Nothing. The rain was falling. It was something about the sound of the rain that finally pushed her to open it. The locked door. A hard, pounding rain had turned the dirt road to mud and made the windows tremble. Zora paced the house like a restless cat, the power flickering. She stood in front of the locked room again, drawn by a pull she couldn't name. She fetched a hairpin, heart hammering. The lock clicked open on the third try. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a room cloaked in shadows. It smelled like thyme, old wood, dried flowers, candle wax, and something smoky, like burnt sugar. Shelves lined the walls, filled with bottles, stones, feathers, bones. Charms made of copper wire and dried fruit hung from the rafters. A small altar sat in the corner, surrounded by white candles burned to stubs. And there, resting atop a carved wooden box, was a journal bound with faded red string. Zora picked it up. Her fingers trembled. Inside, the first page was blank, except for a single sentence written in that familiar, looping script. For Zora, when you are ready to remember who you are. The dreams began the night she opened the journal. Zora had barely read 5 pages before sleep pulled her under like a warm tide. The words were written in her grandmother's hand, part memory, part instruction. The entries didn't read like a diary, but like a guidebook wrapped in story. One page spoke of river spirits who braid the hair of women with purpose, another of the line, unbroken, until the blood chooses to forget. Zora fell asleep with the journal still resting on her chest. In her dream, she stood in a wide circle of women. They wore white dresses, flowing and frayed at the edges, bare feet planted firmly in red soil. The women had different shades of brown skin, different heights and shapes, but each had the same fire in their eyes, something fierce and ancient. They chanted in Creole, their hands raised to the sky, their voices rising with the wind. One woman stepped forward. Her hair was silver locks wrapped in gold thread. Her eyes locked with Zora's. "You come late," she said, "but the blood still sings." Zora jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The candles on the altar in the prayer room had somehow lit themselves. The journal was still open to the page with a sketch of a spiral, just like the one carved into the door. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know whether to run or kneel. Over the next few days, the dreams continued, each one clearer than the last. In one, she was grinding herbs while a woman, maybe Mama Anita's mother, whispered prayers over her shoulders. In another, she walked barefoot through a dense forest, guided by the sound of drums. Zora began to recognize their faces, women from the old photographs she found tucked in the journal. Names surfaced in her mind like echoes: Yvonne, Josephine, Cecile. None of them living, but all of them watching. The journal spoke of keepers of the light, of a gift passed down through touch, through ritual, through remembering. Mama Anita had known Zora would resist this. She'd written it plainly: the world raised you to forget. But the house, the land, the blood, it never forgets. Zora closed the journal one afternoon and stood at the edge of the veranda, staring into the thick, humming forest. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with knowing. Something deep in her bones stirred. A door had opened inside her, and there would be no closing it now. The next day, the cafe sat in the heart of the village, a coral-colored building with flaking shutters and a front porch lined with potted aloes and baby goats standing but the steps. A sign overhead read Simone's Kitchen. Zora had come for Wi-Fi and a proper coffee, hoping to book a flight back to New York and get her business life back in order. She wore a breezy sundress and a straw hat low over her eyes, hoping to go unnoticed. But Simone, a thick-waisted woman with skin the shade of tamarind and a voice that carried, spotted her immediately. "Zora Ellison, I woulda know them cheekbones anywhere. You is Anita's gran." Zora smiled and nodded, unsure how to answer the warmth and familiarity in the woman's tone. She hadn't even said her grandmother's name aloud since the funeral notice. Simone ushered her to a table in the corner, brought her a black coffee as well as a fresh sliced coconut tart, and sat down like they were old friends. "You staying long?" Simone asked. "Just a few more days," Zora replied, stirring her coffee. "I'm handling some estate things." Simone looked at her knowingly but said nothing. The silence stretched. A few minutes later, Simone had to get back to running the cafe, as Zora opened her laptop and connected to the dodgy internet. Just then, two men entered the cafe, speaking in hushed tones that pricked at her ears. She didn't intend to eavesdrop, but her table was close, and they weren't exactly quiet. "Prime land. Untouched forest. If we move fast, we can include the Tucson lot. That house won't stand another hurricane anyway." Zora froze. The men continued, casually tossing around numbers and names: foreign developers, investment groups, permits being handled, before the elders could object. One name jumped out like a slap: Row Holdings. Her heart dropped. Tasha. Zora closed her laptop, palms shaking and slick with sweat. She hadn't told Tasha about the house in detail, just that she was in Dominica, handling family business. Her former friend had likely found out through their shared company account. Of course she had. Row Holdings, their joint wellness brand, was always sniffing for the next expansion, and Tasha didn't believe in land having spirit or history. To her, it was all property, strategy, profit. Back at the house, Zora paced the prayer room, the journal open beside her. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves had heard what she'd overheard. She lit a candle, something she never used to do, but now did instinctively, and whispered to the air. "I don't know what I'm doing." The flame flickered wildly, then settled. Zora didn't need a dream to know she was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to everything she knew: New York, boardrooms, sleek marketing desks. The other, it led straight into the forest, and deep into her grandmother's world. The night sky stretched like black silk above them, speckled with stars that felt impossibly close, like you could pluck one if you reached high enough. Malik led Zora through a narrow trail just beyond the edge of the village, a woven basket in one hand, a flashlight in the other. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked, trying to keep pace in her sandals. "Bonfire by the beach," he said over his shoulder. "Couple of the village youth, some elders too. Stories, food, music. Here, you hear the things they don't put in books." Zora had hesitated when he first invited her. She'd spent the whole day unsettled over what she'd heard in the cafe, her body tense with indecision. But something in Malik's eyes had grounded her. There was something about the way he moved through the land, like it was breathing with him. They emerged onto a small stretch of black sand, hidden between cliffs. The fire was already lit, tall, golden, and snapping like it had a voice. Around it sat about 20 people, young and old, passing around roasted breadfruit and rum in small cups made from hollowed calabash. Someone beat a hand drum softly. When Zora stepped forward, a few heads turned. She could feel the weight of recognition. "She's Anita's gran," someone whispered. "Yes," Malik answered for her. They made space beside the fire, and Zora sat between Malik and a woman named Celeste, whose silver hoops caught the firelight. Soon, the air filled with stories, of river spirits who sang men into madness, of suppliants and silent forest watchers. But it was Malik's voice that silenced the group. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the flames. "They say," he began, "that a woman once lived at the edge of this forest. Her name was Anita, but the spirits called her Lightkeeper. She didn't ask to be chosen. The gift came in her sleep, like it comes to most women in her line. Zora stiffened. Some feared her, he continued. Said she knew things she shouldn't. But when babies couldn't breathe, they brought them to her. When the rain stopped falling, they begged her to bring it back. And when the dead wouldn't rest, it was Anita they called in the dark. He glanced sideways at Zora, his voice gentler now. Her blood hasn't gone cold yet. Silence rippled through the group. Then, someone threw another log onto the fire, and the stories resumed. Laughter rose again, but Zora sat quiet, her heart thrumming like the drumbeat in the sand. Later, as Malik walked her back through the forest, the crickets chirped louder, and the moonlight spilled in silver ribbons across the path. Why tell that story tonight? She asked. Because the land already knows you're staying, he said softly. It's just waiting for you to say it out loud. Zora sat cross-legged on the prayer room floor, the journal open in front of her and her laptop glowing faintly beside it. The two worlds clashed, glossy tech and sacred parchment. One promised structure and strategy, the other whispered intuition, lineage, and things that couldn't be measured in quarterly projections. She had spent the morning on Zoom with her assistant, who looked thoroughly annoyed that we had to a video call, instead of in their usual Midtown office. Tasha wants numbers by Monday, he'd said. She's talking expansion and has investors flying in next week. You still planning to pitch the Roots Rituals line or what? Zora had nodded, said she'd think about it, but her heart wasn't in it. She'd created the wellness brand Elan Essence with Tasha, as a tribute to Black women's healing. But here in this house, this living house, she saw how shallow their New York offerings were. Lavender bath bombs and crystal-infused toners weren't legacy. They were packaging. This was something else. She ran her fingers over the pages of Mama Anita's journal. There were recipes scrawled in the margins, bush tea blends, wound poultices, fertility steams, all handed down from mother to daughter. There were also visions recorded like diary entries, women in veils, water flowing backwards, names written in smoke. A new idea had begun to form inside her, slow but insistent. What if the house wasn't just an inheritance? What if it was the blueprint? She started sketching on a pad. Retreat space for women of the diaspora, rooted in ancestral practices. A space for healing, for storytelling, for ceremony. Not sanitized spirituality, but the raw, rooted kind passed down in whispers and drumbeats. But the logistics overwhelmed her. There were repairs to finish, land permits to look into, funding to secure. Tasha would laugh her out of the boardroom if Zora came back talking about herbs and spirit baths. Still, she couldn't stop her hand from moving across the page. By late afternoon, Malik had returned with planks to reinforce the back stairs. He caught her sitting on the veranda surrounded by notes, her brows furrowed in thought. You planning to stay longer? He asked. Zora exhaled slowly. I don't know. I feel like I'm standing on two roads. One takes me back to everything I built. The other, she looked toward the forest, asks me to become something I don't understand yet. Malik sat beside her, stretching his legs out in front of him. Maybe you're not supposed to understand it yet. Just feel your way into it. Zora looked down at her notes. The wind flipped a page in the journal, landing on an entry titled, Legacy Verses. Ownership. She read the line Mama Anita had scribbled at the bottom. Land you own can feed you. Land you honor can free you. She didn't know what would come next. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of staying. Zora woke with a pounding in her skull and the distinct taste of copper on her tongue. Her body felt heavy, as if gravity had wrapped her in thick vines. She tried to sit up, but her limbs resisted. The morning sun poured through the slatted wooden shutters, casting golden lines across the room. Sweat clung to her skin, and her breath came shallow. Something was off, deeply off. She barely remembered falling asleep. Only flashes. Malik's voice on the veranda, the low hum of frogs in the bush, and then, a rush of heat in her chest and darkness swallowing her whole. By the time she managed to stand, she stumbled toward the kitchen sink, splashing water on her face, gripping the basin to stay upright. That's when she noticed her reflection in the small wall mirror. Her eyes were different. Brighter, sharper, like something ancient was watching her from behind them. A knock came at the door. She opened it to find a small, sturdy woman wrapped in a navy headwrap and long patterned skirt, carrying a calabash bowl and a bundle of green leaves. Her bracelets jingled like warnings. "Come now. We don't wait too long when spirits get hungry," the woman said without introduction. Zora blinked. "I'm sorry, do I know? I'm Mama Zelda. You knew me when you were a baby. I used to play your hair before Anita sent your mother away. Now hush. Take off your shoes and bring the journal." Bewildered but too weak to protest, Zora followed Mama Zelda, barefoot into the back garden, where a basin of river water had already been placed beneath a wide breadfruit tree. Smoke rose from a clay burner beside it, and wild marigolds circled the space like a sacred crown. "This is spirit sickness," Mama Zelda explained as she unwrapped bundles of crushed herbs, cerasee, fever grass, basil, guava leaf. "It happens when your soul too open and the spirits rush in too fast. You dreaming too deep, too soon." Anita was strong, but even she needed help learning to carry it. She dropped the herbs into the water with quiet prayers in patois, then turned to Zora. "Strip down, all the way." Zora hesitated, blinking. "Wait, what?" Mama Zelda gave her a look sharp enough to cut stone. "The spirits ain't modest. You want healing or you want answers." Zora peeled off her clothes slowly, heart thudding. Mama Zelda handed her a white cloth and guided her into the cold basin. The moment the water touched her skin, she gasped. Visions surged behind her eyes. A woman standing in moonlight, blood dripping from her fingertips, a circle of women singing into a fire, a baby being wrapped in plantain leaves and laid in a cradle made of roots. Tears streamed down Zora's cheeks. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming knowing. When the bath was done, Mama Zelda pressed a finger to her forehead. "Your grandmother's blood is stirring in you now. You can't run from it." Zora, wrapped in linen and trembling, knew she wouldn't even try. After the spirit bath, Zora felt both lighter and heavier, lighter in body, as if some unseen weight had lifted, heavier in soul, as if unseen eyes watched her every move. Sleep came slower that night, but when it did, it pulled her deep into a vivid dream unlike any before. She found herself standing at the edge of a river, its waters shimmering silver under the glow of a full moon. The air smelled of damp earth and wild jasmine. The trees whispered secrets she couldn't quite understand, their branches swaying in time with a silent rhythm. A figure appeared across the water, a woman wrapped in flowing white fabric that caught the moonlight like liquid silk. Her hair was long, thick locks adorned with tiny beads and shells that tinkled softly with every movement. Her skin glowed with a golden hue, and her eyes, fierce and wise, locked onto Zora's with a piercing intensity. "You have come," the woman said, her voice echoing like the river itself. "You carry the blood of the Lightkeepers, but your spirit is still unsettled." Zora took a hesitant step forward, but the river stretched between them, deeper and wider than she expected. "Who are you?" Zora whispered. The woman smiled gently. "I am Cecile, your great-great-grandmother. I waited for you here, at the crossing between worlds. You must remember who you are if you are to protect what we have built." As Cecile raised her hands, the water began to ripple and rise, forming images, women weaving baskets, midwives singing lullabies, children running through forest paths, and a house standing tall amid the trees. Zora felt a surge of emotion, love, loss, strength, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Before she could speak, the vision shifted. The river darkened, shadows lurking beneath the surface. A low, distant growl rumbled, warning of danger. "You must be ready," Cecile said softly. The past is never truly gone, and the future depends on your courage. The moonlight dimmed as the vision faded, and Zora awoke with tears on her cheeks and a heart pounding with newfound purpose. Outside, the morning sun broke through the shutters, scattering golden light across the wooden floorboards. The forest whispered as if calling her to step deeper into its mysteries. Zora had been thinking all day. She now knew, without a doubt, that her journey had only just begun.
Zora Ellison thought she was coming home to close a chapter, but some legacies refused to be forgotten. In the heart of Dominica's forest, a secret lineage stirs, calling her to remember who she really is. Visions from the past and whispers in the wind pull her deeper into a world of spirit, power, and mystery. But the path ahead is shadowed by forces that want to keep the secrets buried forever. Will Zora embrace the fire within, or will she lose herself to the darkness closing in? The house remembers. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Follow us on our socials. New videos drop every week. This is Caribbean Noir, where every island has a secret. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your soul even more so.